Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of Matthew. We're in Matthew chapter 18, looking at the very end of the chapter. Now, in our last session, we looked at this parable found in Matthew 18, verses 21 through 35, a parable about forgiveness. And we saw this servant who owed his master an unbelievable debt, could never be repaid. When he begged the master forgave him. But then the servant went out and found a fellow servant who owed him just a small debt. But when that servant begged for time and mercy, he refused to give it. And the parable ended with the wicked servant being punished because he would not extend forgiveness as he had been forgiven. Now we understand the nature of the forgiveness. As we've been forgiven, so we need to forgive. But I want to talk about this parable a little bit more today and explore the question, why was the servant, the first servant, unwilling to forgive his fellow servant? He had been forgiven so much. Why was he then so hard and harsh with his fellow servant? Why could he not extend mercy as he had received mercy? We often just assume, well, he was just a sorry fellow and just was unwilling to forgive, and that may be it. But there also may be more to it than that. It may be that this first servant never really understood what forgiveness was. Now, let's look at a couple of verses again. You remember when he first came before his master with it impossible to repay debt. Verse 26 it says, the servant fell on his knees before the master and said, be patient with me, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him and canceled the debt and let him go. Now the master forgave him. The master canceled the debt. He was free. But maybe he didn't understand that. Maybe he didn't receive that. Notice what he asked. If you'll be patient with me, I will repay everything I owe. Maybe the way he heard it was the master saying, I'll give you mercy. That is, I'll give you more time. I'll give you more time. You don't have to repay the debt today. I'll give you a little more time. You know, sometimes we ask that too. Sometimes we owe a debt and we request a little more time to pay it off. So maybe he didn't really understand that he was forgiven. He was. But all he heard was, you've got more time. Well, if he's got more time, he's got to find some money. So when he goes out and finds a fellow servant who owes him some money, well, if I can get this guy to pay his debt to me, I can start repaying the debt I owe. What he was doing was collecting debts in order to pay off his debt. He had fallen into the trap of debt collecting. Sometimes Christians don't understand God has really forgiven them. Now they know in their heads, I'm forgiven. The blood of Christ has washed away my sins. They know that in their heads. But in their heart, they're hearing, God's just given me more time to make things right. Have you ever noticed that sometimes Christians are working so hard, they're working overtime to try to prove themselves worthy of God? They know they've been forgiven in their heads, but they live their Christian lives under a grim duty of, I've got to prove myself worthy to God. Yes, I know he forgave me, but I've got to earn that forgiveness now. I've got to earn my place in God. And they work and they work and they work, and they fall into a legalistic form of religion, a legalistic form of Christianity. They're debt collecting. They're still trying to pay off God by their own hard work. You see, they've never really experienced being forgiven. And therefore, their heart is also not willing to forgive others. They're still trying to earn their place before God. If you ever read the book of Galatians, Paul says to the Galatian Christians, that's the mistake you're making. You started by grace. Now you're trying to earn God's favor as if you have to work your way into the kingdom. Oh, no. Forgiveness is always by mercy, always by grace. I want you to understand that God has forgiven you completely. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to make yourself worthy of it. You are forgiven. And all that you do for God in terms of the life of service you do is not grim duty to prove yourself worthy. It's just the response of love. Because you've been forgiven, you love him so in response, you just give yourself to him. Allow yourself to experience being forgiven, and that will free you to forgive others. Allow yourself to live in grace, and you won't fall into a legalistic bondage. I believe that's what may have happened to the first servant. The master said, you're forgiven. But he didn't understand that. He thought he still had to work to earn the master's approval. Oh no. You're forgiven by mercy. You're forgiven by grace. Walk in the forgiveness of God. You not only began your Christian life that way, but you continue it that way every day, living in the grace of God. I am forgiven. I'm set free from sin. My debt is gone. And now I freely live for God. And also I forgive others as I have been forgiven. Amen and amen. You have a great day today, and I'll see you next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of Matthew.